So after the Sydney Regional, now we get a chance to look at the top 8 decks to see which ones actually were on top. And man, has it had some pretty interesting decisions. I mean, heck, we even have a Teemo that was able to make it into the top 8. So, what are these deck lists? Well, let's go ahead and dive right in. So this was a fun 2 days of being able to view this tournament. I mean, again, it was our first look at being able to see what actually was going on with Unleashed. And we had a bunch of people who were able to bring their decks, and it had only been out for literally 1 week. That's not a lot of time to be able to prepare, and, you know, a lot of people were probably feeling that kind of tension of not being familiar with a set. That can be a pretty big disadvantage. And so when we go in and we take a look at this top 8, and it's like, all right, well, you know, a lot of these are looking really solid of competition. I mean, again, we had Prismaticism being at the top, Alanzq being at the top. We had Challenger TCG having multiple finishes at 9th and 7th with Leblanc and Set respectively. And it's like, okay, so maybe there is something actually here with that kind of competition and skill point. Now, all of the same, I still gotta say, I really love where this meta is headed, and I'm excited to see where it is going to go in the next couple of weeks. I mean, we got Vancouver coming up, then we got Hartford right after that, and it is going to be an absolute blast to be able to dive in and see what all we have to offer. Now, all the same, we are still going to be taking a look at that kind of deck list and things like that to see maybe where this could be heading in the next couple of weeks. I mean, especially with Vancouver, now that you'll have, you know, near 3 weeks of being able to prepare for this set, you now have a 1,400 player tournament that you're able to look at and see what went right, what went wrong. You're able to see the stats especially. I mean, knowing that Aurora was the second most brought deck, knowing that Leblanc was the number 1 most brought deck, Yi had the best day 2 conversion rate, things like that can really help your decision making when going into the next couple of regionals. And so, or even for you guys in particular who aren't necessarily going to be going to regionals, what you can probably bring to your local Nexus Nights and still stand a rather good chance. So we're going to be taking a look at these deck lists because, guys, yeah, some of them are rather interesting. Now, with all of this, we're going to be diving into this on Rift decks in particular, and then we're going to be seeing what all that they have to offer. Now, of course, yesterday we did take a look at the first and second place deck lists, so we're not going to be diving into those again, but instead we're going to be going in from 8th to 3rd at this point. And I gotta say, even when we take a look at like what Diana has to offer with like even from Alan all the way to Nice Boy, who had some really interesting deck tech decisions in there, we're going to be taking a look at all of that. Also, I gotta say, having a Teemo that was able to make it into the top 8 is just absolutely insane. If you take a look at the win-loss ratio for each of these decks, you would see that Teemo on the day of competition had literally a 43% win rate, and yet someone was able to get into 6th place and go 11-2-1. That's impressive. Especially on a deck that a lot of people were calling off and saying, you know, it's really not all that great. I mean, I even remember in one of my past videos, I was talking about Ezreal and Diana, and I was even getting some comments of being like, yeah, but what about Teemo? And I'm like, you know, I bet there's something there for Teemo as a rogue deck. Sure. But then he goes in and gets 6th place, and I was like, okay, there's something here. You know, there might be actually a lot of stuff here that you can hit hard with and really, you know, take the game to your opponent. It's probably a deck that I'm going to be playtesting here in a couple of weeks. I got a couple of others that I'm still playing through and trying to figure out what ones to stick with. We'll go from there. All the same, though, this is just a lot of fun to be able to see what we were able to have. And again, it's kind of funny, too, because there was just all purple again. And luckily, we haven't seen that big of a complaint of how purple is still at the top. It is 7 of the 8 tops. But instead, you know, we get to actually see that, you know, we still had 7 different legends in a top 8. I still think that looks really good. And I also want to say that Aurora, it still is a very annoying and agitating deck to have to go against. It feels like, you know, that once you do get to your hits that you need to find, that you're going to be finding yourself having an easy game, essentially. Not necessarily like, oh yeah, I'm just going to automatically win. There's still going to be some decision making. But even at the same time, you're just like, oh yeah, Elder Dragon hits. All right, cool. Well, I just destroy 3. Oh, then I have, some spells that deal 1 damage to units in battlefields. Yeah, cool. And then there's maybe some bad matchups that you have to kind of prepare for. Or if you don't hit Aurora, there's things that you have to work around. And that's hard because it's like sometimes you just feel like that there is such a big advantage that you already know that they're having necessarily an easier game, and it feels like that you have to have so much go right for you while they get to just coast along the road and you're perfectly fine. So we're still going to be taking a look at Aurora. I'm still waiting to decide how I feel about it until after Vancouver. There's going to be a lot more data to actually take a look at, and we'll see. Now, all in all, I'm still really impressed with Alanzq being able to make it all the way back to the top 8 again, and having just a really solid record. And gotta say, this is going to be just a really fun deck. This is one that I am looking forward to play testing. I've got everything built for it. I also have Leblanc built. I've been playing Azir and Master Yi a lot. This is one that I am definitely keeping an eye on. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Diana specifically says that at reaction speed, you can add 1 energy, and you can spend this energy only during showdowns. So not too bad, and a good idea there. And that 1 extra can make a big difference, whereas people who normally think that, oh, they only have 2 runes up, there's not much to really worry about, and then suddenly you're like, oh yeah, by the way, here's Starcrossed. That kind of stuff can be a really big difference maker in this type of matchup. So, things to keep in mind with that. Then on top of that, a lot of people have been playing the other Diana, the blue Diana. There's a purple one that says literally when you play any spell that you're going to be able to give your unit +2. That is huge. But this Diana is still a guaranteed 2-drop and something that is very helpful in this matchup. So you're going to be able then on top of that to be able to predict. And then after you see what that card is and put it on the top or bottom, then you can reveal the next top card of your deck, and if it's a spell, you could draw it. And a lot of times you just use your Diana Legend to be able to pay for that cost and potentially get another card in hand. So it is money well spent at that point. Now, at the same time, we're still taking a look at things here. We got the Plundering Poro, Ravenbloom Student, Tide Turner, Vex Apathetic. We got 3 in this deck. And I mean, this is one of the most powerful cards that you have in this deck. The fact that it is a 4 energy for my unit that you are able to utilize, that also has Deflect. That also has the ability that says when an opponent plays a unit while I'm at a battlefield, stun it, and they can't move this turn. That's already kind of crazy as it is. I mean, it's one thing to stun it. There's still a possibility that you're able to move into a battlefield and get a point anyway. There's an open battlefield, you move right in. Well, not in this case. In fact, while you are at a battlefield, this is just going to be continually slowing down your opponents. It's a great shutdown for the Irelia style decks and really just the decks in general. Then on top of that, we got Hui, which is just going to be one of the best cards of the set. Again, when I move, draw 1, then discard 1, then do the following based on the discarded card type. If it's a spell, draw 1, gear, ready up 2 runes, unit, give me +3 this turn. And if you have something like Ride the Wind, which purple is able to utilize because that's in the color code, then you're able to just absolutely devastate your opponent. And the fact that you also draw a card first, then have the choice of being able to discard, in and of itself is a big advantage, and it is just going to be such a devastating blow. Then, even on top of that, you're running Vex Cheerless, so in showdowns, your opponent's spells are going to be costing more, and yours are going to be costing less, to a minimum of 1. So it's like, you can go and get a Rebuke out for literally 1 and a power, and that kind of stuff is just absolutely insane. Then on top of that, 1,000 Tail Watcher, which is just a really good game ender. Next, of course, we got the Existential Dread, 20 spells in this deck. Everything else is pretty standard. We have 2 Abandoned, 3 Flash, 2 Ride the Wind, 1 Eclipse, 3 Moonfall, which is going to be one of the most powerful cards in this set, and 2 Starcrossed. Starcrossed is going to be one of the most powerful options here for you. It is also going to be one of the best options when you are going against, like, Aurora, for example. They play out a Elder Dragon. They're going to be targeting 3 units, and you're just like, oh, by the way, though, I'm just going to bounce it back to your hand, and then the triggers don't actually end up going off. And it's that kind of play that can really prepare you to be able to get ahead in points and to really take the game to your opponent. So something that you do have to keep in mind with all of that. Then on top of that, on the side decks, we have 3 Sprite Fountains, 3 Turn to Dust, 1 more Star-Crossed, and a Baron Nashor. So really interesting idea here. Love what Alan was able to do here with this deck, and being able to get 8th place is definitely something to keep an eye on. Really like this idea. Next, of course, is going to be a Challenger TCG deck that is going to be Leblanc. Now, this is just going to be a really solid Legend ability, though I will say that this is probably one of the hardest decks to try to pilot, because there's just so many different pieces that you need to have come together for you to be able to take the game to your opponent. Now, with that even being said, the Legend ability is insane. That when you conquer or hold, you may discard 1 and exhaust me to play a ready unit. Reflection unit tokens, to play a readied reflection unit token there. It becomes a copy of another unit there and give it temporary. So, essentially, you're just going to be like, hey, by the way, I'm doubling my might here to defend for the round, and then I have a really good chance of being able to possibly score if my original unit ends up surviving. And that can add a whole lot of pressure to you as a competitor, because it's like, how do I get over all of that might in this case? And that can be something really difficult to try to then play through. Now, then on top of that, you even have the regular Leblanc that you're going to be playing. The yellow Leblanc for 3 and a power, 3 might, also has Assault, and then it has a Death Knell ability where you draw 1, but if it is at your beginning phase, draw 2 instead. So that's going to be just absolutely solid right there, too, to be able to see. And even just getting that little bit extra card draw is huge. Not only that, if you make a temporary of Leblanc, then it dies at the beginning step, and you're going to be able to draw 2 cards. So really, something that has this kind of color combination, you're normally worried about card draw, but actually, you're in a really good spot with what you're able to utilize here that I absolutely love these options. Now, next, of course, we got 28 units of Soaring Scout, Watchful Sentry, Black Rose, Dignitary. This is a new card. It's a 3 for 2 that has Assault, which means it gets +1 while attacking, and a Death Knell of Channeling a Rune Exhausted. Galio, one of the best. You're going to be able to maybe not deal any combat damage, but it's still a 6 might for 3 and a power. That's insane. Then on top of that, you have Karthus, which is going to be adding Death Knell triggers. And I mean, Glass Mixologist has a ability that, you know, when it dies, it's just able to play out a unit that costs 3 and 1 power or less. And if it has Karthus out on the battlefield too, then you're just like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm looking real nice right now, because it's going to be triggering twice. That's the kind of stuff that can be just insane on giving you that kind of advantage that you need. Not only that, you have Vi Peacekeeper. This has Ambush, probably one of my favorite cards of the game. And then when I attack, you get to stun an enemy unit here. The fact that you can just ambush and stun, that's insane. That's crazy that you're able to do that, because especially if your opponent's defending, they're already tapped out, they take a look at your battlefield and there's like, yeah, there's not really anything that they're going to be able to use to be able to go in and take this battlefield. I think I'm safe. And then you're just like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm attacking in with a 3 might unit. Oh, and here's a 5 might unit out of the blue, and you're stunned. Even if you don't take down, like if there's multiple units there and you don't take the battlefield, well, then you're still finding yourself being able to take out maybe the biggest threat on the battlefield, with maybe the chance of being able to attack him with a different one later. I mean, then on top of that, we got the Ruined Rex that has a Death Knell of deal 4 to an enemy unit. And then you have a Thousand Tail Watcher, a Harnessed Dragon, and 3 Rift Heralds. I mean, this card is just absolutely crazy. And, I mean, it says that when I move to a battlefield, look at the top 3 cards of your main deck. You may reveal a card from among them and draw, or a unit card from among them and draw it to recycle the rest. Then, as a Death Knell, you are able to play a unit from your hand based to your base, ignoring its energy cost. So you still have to pay the power cost. That's fine. We're perfectly happy with that. Then we got things like Baited Hook that is thrown into here. And people watching this are just like, okay, yeah, people are picking up their Baited Hooks. It's a $70, $75 card right now, and it's because LeBlanc is able to utilize this. And we've had a big debate on how to actually build out LeBlanc, which is, you know, can sometimes be a really tough situation. But you go in and people were debating, do we go the Death Knell route or do we go the Baited Hook route? And in this case, Challenger TCG came in and said, yeah, we're doing both. You know, she's like that little girl from the commercial saying, why not both? you know? Same thing. So then on top of that, that is just going to be giving you a huge advantage. If you're able to then, like, destroy a ruined Rex, and you have Karthus out in the base, and you're able to deal 8 damage to an enemy unit, not to a unit in a battlefield, or to an enemy unit. So you could take something out from the back row. That's the kind of stuff that is absolutely crazy. And then Baited Hook is able to play out like maybe a Rift Herald, or, you know, a Harnessed Dragon. And if you take out and play a Harnessed Dragon, then people are just like, wait, what? That's insane. And yes, it really is. Then, of course, you got 3 Sacrifice, 2 Hidden Blades, 3 Mirror Images. Again, one of the best signature spells here. You get to play a Readied Reflection unit token to your base. It becomes a copy of that unit, and you give it temporary. So if your opponent has just an insane unit at a battlefield, well, then you can copy its might, essentially, and then just attack it and trade. And so you're able to take out a really big threat there that can make that big of a difference. So we'll see what actually ends up happening. But this has been just a really crazy deck to be able to see what it's able to do. And guys, it is an absolute blast to be able to play. But again, it can be really complicated. And if you end up making a couple of misplays, you're going to be finding yourself having a really difficult time playing this game. But when you find that balance and rhythm that Leblanc is able to offer, you are able to just have an absolutely devastating game that is so difficult for your opponent to try to keep up with. I love this deck. It is so fun to be able to play. A little more pricey for sure, but man, if you're able to build this deck, highly recommend it. Now, next is going to be a Set 1 legend himself, Teemo. Now, the reason why I love this is because, yeah, a lot of people have been counting this guy out, and even by all the stats, it looks like this should be a C or D tier style deck. Yet it was able to get top 8. It was able to even defeat Diwali and go against some pretty formidable foes and be able to, you know, just have a really solid game. And it's like, you know, the legend ability itself is really good, that instead of having to pay a power for hiding a card, you just pay an energy. And then on top of that, you can pay 1 to put a Teemo that you own to your hand from your champion zone or the board. So again, that can just be something really cool to be able to use. Then you're also using as your champion a Teemo strategist. Why? Well, it says specifically if or when I defend or am played from hidden, reveal the top 5 cards of your main deck, deal 1 to an enemy unit here for each card with hidden, then recycle them. So you can see where we're going with this. You can see the theme of this deck. We got Evelyn, that is going to be a hidden card. We got Teemo Scout hidden. We got another strategist that's hidden, Tide Turner, Windslinger, Sneaky Deckhand, which is just going to be able to be played out for some quick play stuff. 3 Nocturne. So if you're looking at 5 cards, the odds of you seeing a Nocturne, pretty dang high. Then you're going to be able to add essentially 4 might to a battle. That's essential. Then, of course, you got a Baron Nashor. Then on top of that, you got 3 Sprite Fountains. Again, probably one of the best aggro decks of this set, easily. No debate there. And you're able just to score and get up against your opponent 2 points, essentially. And that's the kind of stuff that is just insane. You can go to 2 points to, you know, 2 to 0, essentially, if your opponent's not ready. And even being up at that point can be such a difference maker. And a lot of times they're also going to be playing and having like a 2 might unit out. And you might be able to take out that battlefield with the second sprite that is coming into battlefield. Really cool stuff right there. Then on top of that, we got Existential Dread Abandoned, Bone Skewer. This is one that we haven't seen actually all that much. Now, it is a hidden card, 2 and a power, that you get to choose a battlefield. An opponent reveals their hand, and you may choose a unit from it. They play that unit to the battlefield, ignoring any and all costs, and when they do, stun it. So if you're defending, for example, I don't know, with the Teemo strategist, and you just won the battle, you know, kind of thing, and then you reveal a hidden card that, I don't know, might be the Bone Skewer, and then you're able to just, again, be able to bring something in and stun it and take it down again, then while also having Teemo strategist being able to search through the deck, and you end up finding a Nocturne in the process. That's the kind of stuff that can absolutely devastate boards, and you can see where the combos are already starting to go. Not only that, Nocturne comes in, and he also has ganking, which means you can just move from one battlefield over to the other, and that even even in and of itself can be a big difference maker. I mean, you got just a ton of great spells that you are able to use. And I gotta say, this is maybe one that I am bringing to my local Nexus night at this point. This is one that I am just going to have an absolute blast being able to play. I think this is going to be one of the best built decks of Sydney, just because, again, it was one that people were just counting out. No one thought that Teemo was going to be coming in and being able to be so powerful. Again, 43% win rate for Sydney. That's insane. And then this is able to still make it and get 6th place out of 1,400 competitors. That is absolutely impressive, and one that I am going to continue to keep an eye on. Now next, we got another Irelia. This is going to be specifically from Ghoster Driver. Ghoster Driver is one of the competitors that I respect the most. Love the guy. Was able to get in the top 4 with Victor. Now, of course, he had a very unfortunate end to that tournament run where he was going against an Aurora deck, and they kept hitting the Mind Splitters and taking out all the answers that he was able to draw, and that was just such a sad one because I really wanted to see Victor get into the finals. If you guys know, that's been one of the most played decks that I have played in the past 2 sets, and unfortunately, it's just not there anymore. I wish that it was. But even still, in that color combination, there's better options for you to be able to play. Well, it looks like Ghoster Driver has switched over to Irelia, and rightfully so. It is such a good deck. Now, the hardest part about Irelia, though, is that even if you are rather skilled with Irelia, you can find yourself in a difficult predicament when you're going into the mirror. The reason why I say that is because it can sometimes just feel like a toss-up, that you're trying to get the best cards that you're able to draw, you're trying to get things moving and get things played out, and if your opponent just ends up drawing better with their Irelia, then you're just going to probably end up losing. You know, that's the hardest part about this deck. Meanwhile, it is probably the best deck now in set 3, so definitely something to keep an eye on there. Then on top of that, this actually is a little bit more unit heavy now that we have had the bans come out, and rightfully so. Instead of necessarily keeping the queen alive, we're actually using a lot of our units for either card draw or to be able to just have units to move in and continue to get points. I do kind of like this version a lot better than what Irelia was originally, and it's able to play incredibly well. Now, you got 3 Lonely Poros, 3 Tide Turners, 1 Pike. Now, this is a 3-for-3 that can also be hidden. It also has backline, so it's going to be actually taking damage last. And then once each turn, when an enemy unit dies while I'm at a battlefield, play a gold gear token exhausted. That can be something to really catch your opponent off guard. It's not something that they're going to be anticipating or expecting, and that is something that you can capitalize on, especially in an Irelia deck. Then also, strangely enough, 1 sneaky deckhand. I don't know why. You know, I mean, yeah, you're normally going to have, like, a battlefield that is available to take, but only 1. You know, you're not going to see it a whole lot, necessarily. But still, when you do have an open battlefield, because more often than not, people are going to be backing away and trying to stay out of the battlefields and attacking in response to Irelia, especially if she ends up getting stuck in a battlefield. If you are then able to go in with like a sneaky deckhand, you have half of what you actually have to use to be able to conquer both battlefields with units. You'd much rather pay 3 energy than potentially 2 power to be able to target and ready Irelia with your legend ability and maybe attaching an equipment or something along those lines. That's the hard part. So sneaky deckhand can still come in clutch. Again, I'm always a little bit curious though, why 1? But still, again, really fun card to have in this deck. 3 Stellacorns, obvious reason. When I move, draw 1. 2 Vex, Apathetic. Again, just an absolute powerhouse of a card in this set. And especially in Irelia, it will slow down your opponent so incredibly fast. Then on top of that, you have 1 Mind Splitter. Definitely understand that. And with the gold generation and just not being as power hungry as what we saw in set 2, it is in a much better place. Then we have some gear, Guardian Angel, Zonia's Hourglass, Boots of Swiftness, and an Edge of Night. Again, just giving yourself a chance to be able to target your Irelia or units in general to be able to get them to move around. I do like this idea. Only 1 Guardian Angel in Zonia's Hourglass. Normally we see like 3 Guardian Angels and none or 1 Zonia's Hourglass. Boots of Swiftness we normally also see at 3 because that ganking with a unit can score you so many more points. We also see a lot of times of people trying to run this with like the Baron Nashor, because then you create a third battlefield, and even if the Baron ends up getting taken out, Irelia can run between 3 battlefields and just capitalize on it. Though, that is a much more risky of a play. I've tried the deck itself, and sometimes you have to really go out of your way to try to play out a Baron Nashor. In this case, I do think that this version of the deck just has a ton more consistency. That is something that the deck absolutely needs to rely on. That's going to be the hardest part. You need to be able to rely on that. So we'll see how this actually ends up going. But then, of course, you got your very spell-heavy style of gameplay. You got Starcross, Back Off, Ride the Wind, Hard Bargain, 1 Flash, 3 Discipline, 1 Gust, 2 On Guards, 3 Defies, 3 Defiant Dances, and 2 Charms. And again, this is going to be just a really dynamic deck to be able to play. It is one that is a little bit complicated to be able to pilot. So if you're looking at building a really fun deck, this is probably one that you're wanting to build. It will take a second to be able to get the correct lines down and to realize when to actually activate your legend ability, when to not. And, you have to also know your matchups incredibly well, because if you don't know what you're expecting when going in against your matchups, you can just be severely punished. And so something to keep in mind with that, but still really love what Irelia has to offer. And it is going to be just a really fun deck to be able to pilot. Now, next is going to be Vex. Now, we got one more after this, so we'll hang in there. But with Vex in particular, the fact that you were able to get 4th place with this deck is amazing, especially because this is one that maybe snuck up to a lot of people, where even when I was watching a lot of the Chinese tournaments and where stuff was placing and how they were doing, and it just wasn't necessarily being like, Vex is good, Vex is one of those top decks. And like we had Runes and Rift that was able to have Vex get like 2nd place once or twice, kind of thing. But in the actual big tournaments with like 128 players over in China and things like that, Vex was just off the radar. So then we come in with Vex and we see that, it's actually able to be a pretty consistent and powerful deck. That the stun abilities, that actually being able to hold and being able to draw a card is really powerful. I mean, that's interesting because especially when we started looking at this deck and the legend was revealed and we're like, when you are an ally hold, you may exhaust me to draw one? We're like, no, that's not good. What the odds of holding in this game are not good enough to be able to weigh the cost of running this legend in particular. But actually, it is. And you can also build this deck relatively cheap because if you get the structure deck, well, then you're able to build a lot of this deck for relatively cheap. Vex Apathetic is also going to be one of the best cards, and you have that in your champion zone. You have the guarantee of being able to have Vex Apathetic ready to go whenever you are willing to play it. And if your opponent ends up getting a really slow start, they don't find that 2-drop, you do. You go into a battlefield, you play out Vex, and then all their units end up coming in stunned. That's the kind of stuff that is very difficult to come back from. Then, of course, we got Evelyn. She is going to be just such a great card. You do want to save it until your following turn, and if you're able to hold with a hidden card, then you are able to just drag someone in to the battlefield, and that can be a really big difference maker. Yeah, you might be sacrificing Evelyn, but if you're able to take out a pretty formidable foe, then that is absolutely game-changing for you. Now, we have the mutated Mauser to be able to get some tank going. Now, the hard part is it is rather easy to deal 1 damage. There's a lot of spells that are being ran right now that deal 1 damage. But if they don't have that and they have to attack into a cat that also ends up having tank and shield too, then it can be so difficult to try to get around that. And then also you got the Teemo Scout, so another hidden card that is going to be able to come in, and when it gets revealed, it gets +3. That's good. That looks really good. Then you got 2 Treasure Hunter, 2 Pike, 2 Ember Monk, 2 Kha'Zix, and 2 Sona. And Sona's going to be just so good because when you get her out into a battlefield, then you're just able to ready 4 runes. And that is going to be so incredibly hard for your opponents to then try to attack in and figure out, how do I then deal with Vex? How do I try to get and take these battlefields when you have 6 cards in hand? You're probably going to be stunning my units, and also you're probably playing hitting cards too that I have to try to calculate and figure out how to get around those issues too. It's tough. And I mean, gotta say, this is also one of the top climbers where hasn't necessarily seen a whole lot of play, and it went from basically a $3 card now to an $11 or $12 card. I really like this card. I think it's been slept on for too long, and to be able to see the impact that it's able to provide to this meta has been so fun to be able to see. Next, of course, we got 4 gears, 2 Boots of Swiftness, 2 Edge of Nights. We also have a lot of spells. Some Defies, Existential Dread, Gust, Discipline, Emperor's Divide, Switcheroo, Back Off, and a Star-Crossed. Emperor's Divide is just so good, especially in your Aurora matchups. It's the green flash. You're going to want to go in and have this hidden so it can be at reaction speed. And then if you reveal Emperor's Divide and after Elder Dragon has made his targets in each battlefield and you move them all back to base, those targets become invalid targets, and only the unit that was targeted by the dragon from the base is able to actually be killed. Everything else becomes invalid. So really good right there. Love running 3 Emperor's Divide. Even if you do have a surprise from your opponent, being able to then use Emperor's Divide to bring your stuff back for a turn, gather your efforts, and then move right back in is really fun to be able to see. I am a big fan of this deck. I am excited to see what it is able to do. I think Vex is possibly has a chance to be one of the top decks. I'm not going to say like it's above all of them, you know, like what Irelia is. I think Irelia is the #1 deck, but I would say that Vex has a chance or an argument to be made that it could be a top 4. That's impressive, especially on something that we initially thought was going to be such a dead deck. Why would you want to hold? You know, it's just so counterintuitive to try to be rewarded for holding. And it's not even for drawing a card for both battle. If you hold both, no, sorry. It's just if you hold one or both, you get 1 card regardless. That's not great. This deck has something to offer, though. And it's really good. And again, if you're wanting to build this deck, it got 4th place at a regional for $58. So again, if you're looking to build a really good deck, not wanting to spend a bunch of money, there you go. Now, of course, the last deck that we're going to be taking a look at is going to be the Diana that ended up getting 3rd place. Now, the hardest part about this Diana deck, we're not going to spend too much time on it, is that it has a lot of great stuff going for it. One of the biggest pieces that was really interesting to see, and I was talking with this with a couple of viewers while we were co-streaming the tournament, was Frigid Jewel. This is really the biggest difference between, you know, what we saw with Alanzq Diana compared to this one. Frigid Jewel. When you draw your second card each turn, give a friendly unit +2 this turn. That's a one-time thing. It's not every time you draw an additional card. No. Every time you draw your second card, you give a unit +2. It's a 2-cost gear, no power, that's fine. But this is the interesting part because it's like, okay, you know, how big of an impact is that +2 actually making? And it was still able to get 3rd place, you know. And so this is something that I'm really keeping an eye on and something that I'm playtesting for myself because of what it's able to do. So we'll see what it offers. But I think that this is going to be just a really cool idea here. I also got to say the big difference too is having Fizz in this deck. I think that that is going to be a really big game changer here. Because you can go and play Fizz. Play a spell from your trash. Say you play Moonfall. Cool. Then you're able to drag a unit in, destroy that unit. Then you play out Star-Crossed, you target Fizz, he goes back to hand. You then go over and target a unit in a battlefield or at base. You return them to their owner's hands. And then you have Fizz that could potentially next turn come right back in, play Star-Crossed again. You know, there's some really crazy combo pieces that you're able to get with with Fizz coming in. And I am such a big believer in this card in particular. And if I was to build a deck, I would base it off of Alan while still adding 2 of the Fizz. I am just a huge believer in that card, and I think he really takes what the deck is able to do to that next level.
Then next, of course, we got Vex. We got 3 Hueys. We got 1 Vex Cheerless and a Mind Splitter. And then we also have Last Rites. I also really like that idea because it can really get things moving in that regard. So, things to watch out there. Then, of course, you got 21 spells that you are going to be running. Fading Memories in the main deck, too, is really interesting that you're able to give a unit at a battlefield or a gear temporary. That kind of stuff is a really big game changer, too. So, if you do end up going against an Aurora deck, you're already going to be seeing a lot of cards, and you can give Fading Memories to target the Aurora card itself and have some great answers. You can also target Irelia's Guardian Angel or whatever else it might be. You can also Star-Crossed a Elder Dragon and be able to stop a lot of things that way. There's a lot of really cool plays that you're able to do. I think this one is best rounded for the meta itself. Things I will definitely be keeping in mind with that. And then otherwise, yeah, it's pretty standard, all things considered. I do also got to say, love the 1 Baron in the side deck, 1 Downwell, 1 Unchecked Power, 1 Singularity, Angler Beast. That's also a really interesting one because when you play me, return all units with 2 or less to their owner's hands, 1 Moonfall, 1 Turn to Dust, and 1 Rebuke. So 1 of everything, essentially, that you're able to run there. But again, very fun to be able to play this deck, and I'm going to be curious to see how Diana's going to be able to do in Vancouver, and if that is going to be able to have as good of a run as what we have seen in Sydney. There is still a lot to be explored in this meta. I am so excited to have Unleashed here. It'll be interesting to see what we're able to have going, what the kind of what decks are going to be brought and in what quantity they're going to be brought in when we go to Vancouver. That's 2 weeks away. That's insane. Then, of course, after that, we got Hartford. It's going to be a thrill of a season, guys. It's going to be an absolute blast. I'll be going to Hartford myself as a content creator and can't wait to see how all of that goes for that and look forward to seeing all of you there. That's going to be a blast of a time. So with that being said, guys, that is going to be it for now. What were your thoughts about Sydney? What were your thoughts about the decks that ended up making it into the top? Let me know down in the comments below. And until next time, have a good one.